Well, I mean, in reality, all music is controversial to some extent because it's gonna offend someone's ears. Because one person can have completely opposite opinion on one side, and then someone will come in with a song from the complete opposite side, and then they'll get offended, and like vice versa. So it doesn't really matter, I think. Um, you have to worry, you have to remove the fear of having to offend people because in the end, what good is it going to do you? Like you can't please every single person, and that's something that's hard for me because I think that there are times where I can easily offend somebody, and it's not out of disrespect. It's just the truth. And ultimately, I think the truth is offensive to many people, but it's what sets us free. And I think that's the most important thing to what it comes down to. Like if you're going to offend someone, give them the truth. Don't be offensive just to be offensive.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Music Matters in That podcast. I'm your host, Brian. Today is a special guest, James Koan III. How you doing, brother?
Hey, doing great, Brian. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good. I had a little party, and actually, before you texted me, I was actually getting ready to do a shower because I just did a nice little drum workout not too long ago. So that's why, technically running a little bit late, but we're at least on schedule for the most part. So,
yeah, music makes you sweat, man. I totally get it. It's all good.
Absolutely. And this one was interesting because you had actually reached out to me, and normally it's been vice versa, where I've reached out to other people, other musicians. And unfortunately, I keep thinking that you were actually a drummer at first. So thank God you actually corrected me too, because I actually sent you the questions saying about drums, about this and that too. But James here is a guitar player and also a singer-songwriter, and he's going to fill us in on his resume in a little bit. But I guess, how you been recently, I guess? Doing anything new?
Yeah. I mean, currently, right now, I'm a worship director at Church on the Trail over here in Columbus, Georgia, and that's been my day job for the meantime. But then a lot of evenings, what I'm working to do is build up my music career, and so I've been performing a lot, mostly different bars and restaurants for the majority of last year. But starting this year, I just had my first performance over at the Rock and Roll Pinball location here in Opelika, Alabama, which is not too far away from here exactly. And then on top of that, I've been keeping busy. Released a record back in June of this last year of 2022, and just getting the word out there, trying to let people know as much about my music and everything. And so it's been a pretty crazy journey.
Oh, that's right. You were good friends with Sean Woodley, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, not good friends. Funny enough, I just met him fairly recently, but he was very kind to mention the podcast, and he actually mentioned you, I think, specifically. And I it was random because I stumbled across your channel through looking at his Facebook, and so somehow everybody, I think in the networking business of music, everybody's worlds kind of collide together in some shape and format.
Yeah, Sean, I was actually on his podcast recently, and a couple months ago I invited him onto mine. We got to at least know the story a little bit here and there, and then I decided to owe him back to going on his podcast, so now we at least call it even. So I have to admit, it's kind of new because I haven't really been the interviewee in a good while too, so I think the last one was probably for a job interview, so I'm not really sure. But I'm looking at your entire setting right there. It looks like you're a big book reader.
Well, actually, to be completely honest, I'm borrowing my brother's office at the moment. He actually has his own book channel on YouTube, and he does his own book reading, and so he loves Star Wars, loves reading science fiction novels and everything else pretty much in existence. And so he's continuously collecting books. I do not read books quite as much unless they're informational books, such as books on music making or spiritual books, specifically about the Bible or about mental health and other things.
I was going to say, me and your brother actually get along because I recognize a couple books. I know Robert Jordan. I read one of his books. So.
Oh yeah, you should interview him next. He might like that.
I think that would be for a different one, but this one is more strictly the music one, so I don't know how well that would fit in. So.
Well, if you're doing another podcast, I suppose.
Well, I do have another one with a friend, speak of which, but we'll save that for later. But So the way this works, James, normally when we invite musicians on, since in this case you're a guitar player and singer-songwriter, we're just going to get to know you more as the musician, but also as the individual too. So I got the questions right here. You ready?
Yes, sir. Throw them at me.
All right. So I'll start with the first one here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is James Koan?
That's a very good question, and that's something I'm still trying to figure out day by day. But for me, I would say like first thing that I am a singer-songwriter, but I think actually more importantly, more than that, I'm a believer in God. I'm made in the image of God, and I'm made to give him glory and praise ultimately above everything else, and to reflect my Creator. And so in doing that, I believe that he's given me great gifts within music and creating music. I love to sing, and I think ever since I've been a little kid, I've always enjoyed the experience of singing, and music has always affected me as a person. I think that when it comes to my experiences, I've always had a bit of an ear for music. I could hear when something was not quite right, or when something just needed to be fine-tuned and whatnot. And so from that, I think I've learned a lot just from the past 25 years of getting to learn music. And for myself, I guess to give some experience, James Koan III is a man with many great flaws, but is also a man, a wandering minstrel, just trying to find his place in this world. I guess that's the current stage of my journey, the current chapter of James Koan III, if you will.
And I guess when did you take up the guitar? Did you jump around with various instruments before you settled on guitar?
Yeah, well, actually, if you count vocals as a first instrument, that was my first. This is according to Koan legend, but my parents said that I could start singing at the age of 2 years old, and Koan I'm taking their word for it. My parents don't lie, at least generally speaking, they don't lie. They're very honest, and so. For me, I believe that was the case. And then I think at a younger age, I was singing hymns in the church, and then it led into piano lessons at the age of 4 years old, I believe. And that piano was really my first instrument, specifically of getting to learn and getting to develop in, and then taking choir in middle school and elementary and high school as well. And that helped develop my ear and helped me better understand how to develop harmonies, how to work together. And I think piano just developed the whole theory around that. Guitar, actually, I started picking up when I was 10 years old, and that was around the age that it was really cool to play guitar. And I was probably one of the worst in my class, or at least I was, or second best, perhaps, if you considered. So I wasn't really much to look at that time. But I think like as I continued to develop, and then upon moving away, guitar actually became a lot more dominant. And funny enough, I had preferred to lead only from piano for a long time. And then eventually I just got to the point of like playing guitar for a couple of songs, and then switching to piano for a few, and then coming back to guitar. And then for church, there's already plenty of pianists now, and so it's much easier to play guitar.
Yeah, I would say that too, because my church too, we've limited it down to like a keyboardist and just a acoustic guitar player too. So
really,
yeah, I guess. Do you still play in the church choir, or do any church folklore or something like that?
Well, or
folk band, I should say.
Well, I haven't done church choir at my current church because it's a much smaller church. But I did lead a church choir back when I was in New York. Actually, I led at a church called Grace Point Gospel Fellowship, and they had a church choir that was there. And while I was primarily focusing on directing the bands, I also got to arrange a lot of the church choir pieces, and I would hand them off to other people to be able to direct them as I was leading the worship team and lead the choir. And that was quite an experience in itself. And it's funny because it was very stressful for me at the time because it was just so much to take on. And I was young and naive, even though it was only a couple of years ago. Didn't really know what I was doing and was kind of in a new place, but it really opened up a lot of opportunities or a lot of experiences, getting to better develop my understanding of creating music and developing music. And so I'm really grateful for those chances that I had.
That's pretty sweet. And have you been born and raised in Columbus, Georgia, or have you kind of lived somewhere else and then just kind of jumped around a little bit?
I've lived in a lot of places actually. In Columbus, Georgia, unfortunately, I've only lived here about a year now, and it's not really been home to me officially. I was born in Augusta, Georgia, and get ready for a long list. I moved to Florida at the age of 2 years old, Maryland at age 4, Michigan age 8, and then moved to Arizona age 16, or no, age 17. Moved to, let me see if I get my math right from this. I moved to New York 10 years later, so it was about like 2018. That's when I moved there. Lived there for about 2.5 years, and then the road led me here to Columbus. It's been a weird journey, and there's been a lot of turns from there, and so home has never really been one simple place. I don't want to say like I'm a wandering minstrel that I always like to wander, because truly I don't. But I think at the same time, I've had to learn to be able to make the best of wherever you are. And I think that's been the experience of my life. And I'm grateful for it, because it's opened up so many opportunities to meet many great people.
I was going to say, we're going to go by twos each year of your life, right? Two, I moved to Florida. 4, I moved to New York. 6, I moved to Arizona. 8 to California. Do I hear 10 to Nevada or anything like that?
Yeah, it's usually like 2.5 years or 3 years. It's like I start somewhere and it's like, oh, I got to jump to this place, or I jump to this place and everything. And I mean, there was like a season in Phoenix, Arizona of just moving back and forth. But hopefully that's not going to happen too much longer, because, I'm getting older and I think it's draining having to relocate and uproot. So we'll see what happens.
I'm guessing it was more of your parents. Were they just jumping around different jobs and stuff like that?
Yeah. And I mean, people ask typically, and especially out here, because there's so much of a military environment, people say, well, are you in the military? And it's like, no, I'm in the ministry. And so with my dad, he was involved in Christian schools most of his life. Mostly he worked as a superintendent and basically headmaster, for those of you who don't know who that or what that is. It's basically the level up. It's it's above the principal's level. And so being the superintendent's kid at school, I was not very well liked, at least for the majority of it. But part of the reason I think I was not liked as much was because I also was a little bit arrogant and probably got a little bit too cocky too big for my britches, I guess, if you could say.
I see. Actually, I thought you were going to say Grandmaster, but then I think we would have said you went to like Hogwarts school or something.
Yeah. People probably would have thought of me as a Slytherin or something like that, which hopefully I would probably consider myself more Gryffindor or perhaps Hufflepuff. I don't know.
Nobody gives Ravenclaw any question or any credit. Sorry. I was going to say, that actually sounds like a pretty badass name when you think about it.
It's true, yeah. Well, I mean, and it's funny, I'm not too much of a Harry Potter fan, but my brother is. And so, like, being surrounded by that, and since we're roommates, it's like we talk about stuff like that all the time. So that's our world. Star Wars, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings, and Marvel, and all that stuff. So secretly, I am a bit of a nerd, just not like in the book sense and everything else. So pardon all my rabbit trails, by the way. I go everywhere in conversation.
Is your brother older or younger than you?
He's younger. He's actually at the age of he's 8 years younger than me. So if I get this right, he's 23.
I see. Actually, I was just picturing him being like the Jedi Master, and then you're the Padawan just learning. The nerd is struggling with you, James Koan. Train you, I shall.
That would be an interesting dynamic if he's the master in this sense. But I'd like to think I trained him, because I was the one who got him into Star Wars in the first place. But I mean, I was trained by my parents, so.
Well, I mean, if he's short though too, we could probably compare him to like Yoda or something like that. So
yeah,
like the age is just really hidden, to be honest. So.
Well, you could just call me perhaps like a bit of a Jake Skywalker, whichever you prefer. Actually, we won't even talk about the sequel trilogy, because that's just like uncharted territory that you probably shouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole in the interview process.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
But anyway, just getting back into the music part. Talk about your guitar a little bit, the instruments you currently play, and I guess if you want to jump into your mics too, you can. So what kind of brands are they?
So specifically for guitars, I have a Taylor. It's a 414 CE acoustic electric guitar, and it's probably one of my favorite guitars. I also have a Fender Stratocaster and a Fender Jaguar, which, in all honesty, I'm considering selling in the future because I think that it's not an instrument that I tend to play very often. It's a great guitar, but typically more for soloing, and for myself as a solo artist, I tend to not use it very much unless I'm trying to record a lead line or something of that nature. But I enjoy having those instruments. I think I like the surf tones of the Jaguar, and then I think also the let's see. For other microphones and other things, I have a SM7B microphone that I use sometimes for recording. Right now, I'm currently using my brother's Yeti Blue microphone for recording. And when it comes to pedals, there's a lot of different pedals I tend to use, including different features. Like one of my favorites personally is the 1981 Inventions pedal, which was made by Matt Hoops of Reliant K, and he's Reliant K is one of my favorite bands of all time, and getting to have that pedal was a special gift. I feel like when Matt Hoops released that, because getting to play it, you turn it on, and you feel like you're getting into the record or Forget and Not Slow Down, and it's just like those two records hold a very special place in my life and kind of in my history of music a little bit.
I guess what's your opinion, speaking of Reliant K, I guess, what's your opinion of is it Two Lefts Don't Make a Right? Is that the one album?
Oh yeah. I mean, that album it's a fantastic record. And I think for the time that it came out, it's funny listening to it now. I think my ears probably wouldn't say the same thing as what my ears would have said from childhood, because I listened to that back in middle school, on the bus or on road trips and everything else. And that album certainly holds a special place in my heart because of the songs like Mood Rings, and funny enough, they don't even, I think they apologized for that song recently, so I don't think they even play that song anymore, which is a shame, because it's one of their best, even if it's not politically correct and whatnot. I think that there's just so much fun tongue-in-cheek humor that they put into that record that I really loved, and I think made such an influence in a lot of my writings.
Well, I guess what was wrong with it?
Oh man, this is where I'm going to get in trouble somewhere. I think that as of recently, someone told them that they were offended by Mood Rings because I think it, specifically the way that it portrayed girls, or it portrayed them as like being moody and everything. I think that came across very offensive to a lot of people in certain culture today. And I think that, there's some people that are saying that they went woke, and it's not for me to say, because it's like, I don't know fully their situation. I don't know what happens. And even if they did, being conservative or liberal, I don't know which side you're on in this, but ultimately, I think they're just trying to be present in the current times of what's happening. And I respect that. And I think that they want to be just loyal to their fans. But at the same time, I think that you don't want to you don't want to cancel your own songs unless you really feel like what you were saying was something very incorrect or sinful in that matter, and if you change your ways and you've repented from that, that's different. But in my opinion, professionally speaking, the culture that they were in at that time, it's like that was just teenage culture, and so what they were doing, that wasn't actually anything meant to be offensive. It was just talking about some very specific types of certain girls, and that's not relating to every single girl. That's just like a certain type of girl, just like there's a certain type of guy that's out there that's really crazy or really, really threatening or something like that, or is really easily angered and whatnot. We all have like different personality traits, but I could go down a whole rabbit trail of that if you ask me more about that or anything about Reliant K, because I could talk about them for hours.
Well, actually, I was a big fan of Reliant K too, but I only got into like that album and then the album too. But I especially love the one I'm waiting for. That was probably one of my favorites from that one.
Oh yeah, did you know that song was about Katy Perry?
Was it?
Yeah. The lead singer dated Katy Perry back in the day. So
Oh, jeez.
little fun fact.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I was going to say it's a good love song too, but it could have been about anybody. So I'll give him
Absolutely.
credit.
Hey, yeah.
Well, it's just funny you would mention Relient K just saying something controversial because they never struck me as that sort of band, to be honest. So I guess I don't know. Anybody would just do anything for a little bit of drama these days. So I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, in reality, all music is controversial to some extent because it's gonna offend someone's ears. Because one person can have completely opposite opinion on one side, and then someone will come in with a song from the complete opposite side, and then they'll get offended, and like vice versa. So it doesn't really matter, I think. Um, you have to worry, you have to remove the fear of having to offend people because in the end, what good is it going to do? You can't please every single person. And that's something that's hard for me because I think that there are times where I can easily offend somebody and it's not out of disrespect. It's just the truth. And ultimately I think the truth is offensive to many people, but it's what sets us free. And I think that's the most important thing to what it comes down to. Like, if you're going to offend someone, give them the truth. Don't be offensive just to be offensive.
I mean, that's why I see a lot of like some people in the right wing media. They'll like try to list the whole truth here and there. That's why they say Ben Shapiro destroys this crazy transgender liberal or something like that too. So, I mean, and then it just gets all out of control. But it seems the truth gets twisted a little bit too. And trust me, I know some bands too in the secular space that can get pretty offensive, and sometimes they're pretty direct about it too. So trust me, if the people are complaining about Relient K, that's soft stuff in my opinion. So trust me, I know worse, way worse. So let's not go into that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I didn't think I was going to get political in this interview, so forgive me if anyone thought I was coming across that way.
Well, no. And sometimes it happens quite by accident too, because sometimes one of the interviews I talked about, we kind of got into COVID a little bit, and I guess something bad happened to the guy's wife, and it was pretty tragic because of the whole vaccine and everything. Getting different opinions from doctors and everything, so you can see what happens, and you can see why it ends up becoming a political talking point. So it's okay too, and sometimes it happened quite by accident because it happened to be a controversy with Relient K of all bands, and it just comes up, and then what do you know, we're talking about politics in a certain way. But since you mentioned about Matt Hoops, he would be your biggest influence, and I guess do you have any others?
Well, Matt Hoops is probably not my biggest influence, but he's certainly an influence. I think when it comes to guitarists, I tend to lean more towards not necessarily the great guitarists, but more the greater songwriters. And so I think one of my favorite songwriters is John Foreman. Of course, he is the lead singer and frontman of Switchfoot. I enjoy. Yeah, there's so many influences that come to mind, but greatest CCM artist I think of all time, and I think people don't give him enough credit for his guitar playing, and I think that he's one of the reasons I'm really into Taylor guitars, also because of John Foreman, and I think what's neat too is there's other bands such as Colony House, and Colony House is led by Caleb Chapman, who is the son of Stephen Curtis Chapman, and Wolf Franklin Chapman, who is the drummer of the band. He's also Stephen Curtis Chapman's son, and so it's neat to see a second generation of that. But then it goes down to other artists such as, gosh, I could go for a long time, but currently I'm enjoying certain bands such as the 1975 and the band Camino. I love the sounds and the different scapes that they're creating. Their production design is pretty incredible. Even certain independent Christian artists such as King's Kaleidoscope, Citizens, they've had a very, very good influence on me, especially growing up in church culture and leading worship over the years.
I see. And actually, I was surprised. I thought you would have said Lifehouse in one of your influences there.
I do like Lifehouse. I wouldn't say they're as big of a favorite. I think it's just select songs by them that I really have driven me. But I mean, Everything and what was it, Hanging by a Moment Here with You. I mean, those songs were great rockers back in like the early 2000s. So I mean, heck, why not sing them again today? I think sometimes you got to bring it back, right? You get them ready for the next generation.
It's definitely a nostalgia sort of feel to it. But actually, recently, me and a friend of mine who was also a drummer, we did a song Unknown from that album that Hanging by a Moment was from. And that's the thing that kind of stinks about it too, because you don't really know too much about Lifehouse's other songs. Maybe they played them a little bit here and there, but also they would play more of the big hits. So like Hanging by a Moment, you would hear most of the time. I know First Time was another good song that was by Lifehouse. So it's kind of tragic in a certain way, because you don't get to know too much of the music unless you dig deeper into it too. So I guess what made you want to decide, like, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to be a singer-songwriter. Can you help me go through college and that sort of thing?
Well, my first choice was actually saying, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I want to be a worship leader." And I mean, I think either you choose either to be a singer-songwriter or a worship leader. I think either way, your parents are going to cringe to some degree. But actually, my parents were very supportive of me going for music, because they knew I had an ear at a very early age. And I think that I'm very appreciative of them, because they invested so much into my music at a younger age, especially the first years of college. And I think that, this is dancing further along with the subject, but they really invested into my career, and I think specifically putting me into places where I would have to learn music, and I would have to be able to sing, and that would be in churches, sometimes in school. Sometimes my dad would just say, "Hey, can you come sing for this event, or can you come sing for this chapel in the mornings and everything?" And he still does that today, not as much as he used to, but I mean, I think that nonetheless, they've been very supportive. They've really believed in me. And it's hard, because you don't always have your parents supporting you with everything that you do when it comes to music. But at the same time, I think that for how much they have done for me, I mean, their music also has been an influence on me, because my dad sang and played baritone back in college, and along with that, used to teach bands or concert bands in different schools as well. And so that has been passed on to me in some way. So, I have to take a lot of credit, or give a lot of credit rather, to my family, because if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be doing this.
Absolutely. And it's good that they actually gave you support too. Sometimes I think it's more of the questions like, are you sure you want to do that? And then that kind of plants a seed of doubt in you. It's like, do I really want to do that? And then obviously you start asking those questions, be like, might get too stressed by this sort of thing. Maybe I should branch out into maybe this sort of field. So I guess you say you did go to college. I guess what was that like?
Well, honestly, like I had a really great experience of college. I think that we went through quite a transition from being in college, because actually I was a part of what was called Southwestern College at the time, and then became ACU halfway through my freshman year, or Arizona Christian University. And Arizona Christian University was a great college. I really enjoyed the experience of getting to be there. I got to be a part of a public relations band, and had a scholarship with them, which was a wonderful experience that was led by Tracy Williams, who was a very good mentor for me, I think, in that time. And then going to college as well, I was a part of a band called The Third, and that band was kind of my first attempt at like trying to really create a band. And I wasn't the one who started it, but when I got spearheaded or put into it, I ended up being pushed to become the front man of it. And in that, I think I tried to recreate like a secondary Switchfoot Reliant K-ish band. And it didn't end up working out where we stayed together, but we're still friends. And, I'm grateful for my friend Marcus Hoover and for those guys who were a part of it over the years, because each one of them helped shape and help me understand better how to work with other instrumentalists and how to communicate with them, how to find other parts, and how to see the best in other people, and to set aside our differences and like bring each other together, basically. And so that I really have a lot of gratitude toward Arizona Christian University, and just getting to be a part of that in my younger years, because I think it helped lead me to where I am today.
I was trying to figure out where that Grand Canyon University is, because they seem to advertise that a little bit on national television at times. So I think I'm a lot closer to it, obviously. But regardless, it's funny when you mentioned about the third, though, because I thought they would have done like the third day, kind of like, because then you also know then what it means, given that I don't know if you're Catholic or not. But
Yeah. I mean, that was taken with Mac Powell's band Third Day and everything. So, if we probably could have been sued if we went even further. And I think the reason we said the third was actually there was multiple reasons. It was like for that. And then, of course, I guess, spiritually speaking, we want to put God first in our life, but then we want to put others before ourselves. So if God is first and others are second, then we're the third. That was our whole idea back then. And we didn't know what we were doing. We were college kids just trying to be cool and trying to, at the time, it was just a worship band. I think that was what it started out as. And then we realized, hey, we want to do more than just worship music because there's more within us. And that's how I feel today still. I think that being a worship leader in the church has its benefits, but I feel like if I'm only limited to that, then I'm not actually challenging myself as not just an artist, but as a person. And so a lot of the music that I'm creating now in my solo material is actually specifically meant to branch out and reach out to other genres and other areas where not just Christians can listen to, but anyone can listen to, and really where anyone who has a story or has an experience can hopefully resonate in some way.
I see, yeah. And the college you mentioned, ACU, is it more of a small sort of campus, maybe only like a couple thousand?
It was definitely pretty small, actually. I think at the time, maybe about 600 or 700 students. It's hard to recall because it's been about 10 years or almost 10 years since I've graduated. And so it was very intimate, which I think was actually, some people would hate that. I thought it was actually pretty special because it became very easy to get to know people on campus. And so you couldn't really hide from anybody, even if you tried. And I think that was such a blessing because there was so many roommates that I ended up, while at first, being very uncomfortable with them and not necessarily liking him at first, they ended up becoming some really, really close friends for that time. And so I'm internally grateful for that.
Yeah, I see. Mine, I've always stuck in and around Pennsylvania region, and the one I went to, a fairly decent sized one. It was still what you consider Division III. Obviously, it's more based on sports, but it was only like a couple thousand people. It wasn't like those real big campuses. Once you get to the D2 and D1 schools, which end up having a few thousand to over 10,000 students. So I think the smaller space and smaller campuses made it easier to be more interactive in this case. I don't know, intimate's really the right word, but I can see what you mean too. But I guess I was trying to think of something with the school because I think everybody always has a funny memory from college and stuff like that. And I guess, did you have any?
Well, oh man, there's a few. If I could remember specifically, not so much just from college, but I think from being in the band. If you're okay with one of those stories,
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. That way we can like jump into your current group. Okay.
Yeah, of course. I think that when I was in a band before, I think this might be a joke where you had to know the people that were there, but I think that there was a time where we played for a church camp, and at that time I was so anal about everything, and I was so worried about making sure that everything was aligned and organized, and that we stayed up to par. We didn't mess things up. And so playing for a church camp, I tried to encourage the guys. I was like, guys, let's try to not make any, say anything inappropriate while we're here at this church camp. And so they said, like, so does that mean we can't say rainbow or bubblegum or spoon? And it's like they were just being incredibly goofy. And I think those might have been euphemisms for something else at the time. So, I mean, it's just like, that's a little funny memory of mine that stays into existence, or I think pops into my head currently at the moment. That's the best I can come up with. One thing I remember is that my friend Marcus, he would like to, in college, sometimes when people would fall asleep on the couches outside, we would actually like pick up the entire couch. We would get 4 or 5 people and pick up the couch and move the couch to a completely opposite side of the room, and then see what the person's expression was when they woke up, basically, because then we would like hide and like we would like move it while the person was sleeping, and then like put it down. And so I think the furthest that he moved it actually for somebody was moving it all the way from like the 3rd floor to down the stairs and out the hall. And I wasn't personally a part of this, unfortunately, but he ended up moving it outside to the grass, and so the guy just woke up outside and it was in the middle of a field, and so I think he just like walked into the room and said like "good one" or something like that. He had no expression otherwise, but Marcus was quite the prankster. He was a fun friend.
Is that like the type of guy who would fit into the TV show Jackass? I don't know if you ever seen it before.
I mean, he was not that level of jackass, but I mean, I think that he probably, if he wasn't a believer, if he didn't believe in God, I think that maybe he would have gone for something like that. It's certainly possible. He was quite the prankster for sure. So
I was just thinking something with the mattress. If people were laying down on it, you just like wrap them all in it and you just flip the mattress over and stuff like that. See how they can get out of it then.
He certainly could have. It would have been possible. I think maybe in some other universe that was what Marcus Hoover would have done. Who knows? But who knows? He's going to get more famous after this podcast.
I guess so. Then we're going to say in another universe where Marcus Hoover was a big jackass and stuff like that too. So, all right.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, buddy, right there. Hopefully you guys get back together at some point. Let him know you told that story. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's still a good friend, and I mean, for one of the songs that I've released called Neanderthals, he actually he helps co-write that song, and so that's why I think he's a very special friend, because he was a part of the Third, and even though we broke up as a band, he still let me release that song to be a part of the album, and so I'm really grateful for people like him and just other people that have come into my life over the years. But not to get on a tangent too much.
No, that's actually good. And that's actually really good friends that you should have in your life, too, because life's already too short as is, and there's going to be people who are going to, quote-unquote, mess it up in some way. That's just me not trying to use the inappropriate swear word at that point, so if you know what I mean. Actually, I was earlier when you were talking about, like, rainbows and stuff like that, I thought you were going to say something about a double rainbow where the guy was like absolutely high on like weed or something like that, and there's actually a double rainbow happening because it was raining and that sort of thing. The guy's like, double rainbow, that sort of thing. So.
I remember that video. Yeah, that was a big hit in my time of college, and I imagine it sounds like you were probably at college around the same time that I was. So yeah, that was a big hit. We had a lot of weird videos we watched in our college years. And I think that was just when YouTube was blowing up and everybody was becoming famous very quickly overnight. And of course, there was like the David After Dentist and all that stuff. So we certainly lived in one of the best of times, I suppose you could say. And then it got worse and worse. And now we're on TikTok, and I think we're all just addicted to our social media. So it's an interesting world we live in now.
I always got to blame TikTok for being too Chinese in the case, since that's originated in China. At least that's what I think so too. But unfortunately, that gets political there too. So we're not going to get into that. But
well, everybody's doing it now, so I think everybody's to blame because we're all following the trends. But we can all point the finger somewhere.
It's like no, please don't drag me into this. I'm not getting involved in a political chat here, people. I'm just doing this for fun. So.
Yeah. Please don't at me.
I got nothing to contribute to this. I just vote for whoever I like. The lesser of two evils. So, all right. I guess let's jump into the band a little bit. I guess how many bands have you been a part of outside of the Third, and then I guess did you jump around a little bit?
Well, there was the public relations band that I was in for college, but that was part of being in college, of course. Since then, it's mostly just been leading for worship teams, worship bands. But most of what I've been doing has been much more solo work. Not that I wouldn't want to be in a band. I would certainly love the experience, but I think that it would need to be very special people or people that I'm very closely friends with, because I think that having deep friendships in a band really helps because you have a good sense of trust and a good sense of community. And I think that that's so important. And I had that with the Third, and I really, I'm grateful for that. And if we got back together, I would probably be open to it. But I think that, for right now, the journey's left me on much more of a solo experience and just learning to adapt wherever I'm at. And so if it's just me on stage, that's great. If I can get a cellist to play with me or a full band, that's great too. And I think that the benefit being a solo artist in that way is that you get the best of both worlds. It doesn't have to be just you up there, but I mean, there's that. I think personally, it's more special when you can have a full band.
I see. And actually, before I jumped on this, I did see a little link that you had sent to me. So I was actually checking it out for YouTube, and the song I was on was Radiance. So I guess your current group, I guess, is it just mainly you? Or I guess, do you invite just session musicians on? Or I guess, how's the whole thing work?
Yeah, well, I mean, my main artist name is James Koan III, so basically that's just me. And so if the band breaks up, that's probably going to happen when I die, or I retire at this point. But currently, that's just me at the moment. Thankfully, I've been fortunate to have other artists to work with. When I recorded my first record, Time, which released back in June of this year, or 2022. That actually was recorded and produced by Taylor Simpson, and he did all of the drums for the record and all of the mixing and mastering for the record as well. He's a phenomenal musician, lives actually over in New York, and unfortunately not the same state as where I am right now. But I think that, getting to work with him, he was very, very patient, very intelligent in his drum playing. And so whenever I tried to explain a part to him, he would take the time to learn it and then get it exactly right. And even if it was just like a smidge off in the recording, like it sounded right to my ears, but just a smidge off from the timing, he would make sure to like adjust it so it was exactly right. And so he was very gifted. I had him record most of the record. And then my friend Kenton Sealiff, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, did a majority of the lead guitar lines for the record as well. And so having the two of them was a great benefit. Other artists filled in certain places, Ben Jimenez, and then I believe I actually ended up hiring a musician from Fiverr.com in part of that experience who recorded all of the string lines, or most of the string lines for the songs. And so I wrote out sheet music for the cello, the violin, the viola, and the upright bass. And from what I created, which is, I'm not Beethoven or Bach, but I think from what I created, he was able to write that in, or take that exactly and record it according to the way that I was hearing it in my head. And that was quite an experience because, I didn't even meet this person. I never got to talk to him at all. But he did it without flaws. And so it's amazing what you can find or who you can hire on the internet in this day and age, and what you can do without actually having the same people in the room. And that was the same thing with Kenton Sealiff, actually. He recorded the record, and there was only one day that we had to record together, and he just did it from his computer and sent the tracks over, and my friend mixed it in. Made it sound like we were all together in the room, and it's just amazing how it came together. It's really like I think the one thing I am so grateful for in the midst of what happened of 2020 was that it helped me to realize that you're not limited in your resources, and you can be able to record wherever you're at. You can work with people from anywhere around the world, and I think that the fact we have that technology to do that is a great blessing. As long as you use it in the right way. I will say that for my next record, I would probably like to have people in the same room together because I want to get more collaboration to be able to work together, and so that they can have more input into it. So it's not just my opinion or my way or the highway or anything like that.
Yeah, I can see why. Plus, does it feel a little strange if you're not in like the recording studio? Because I imagine that's how it pretty much was for you pre-pandemic, and then when the pandemic hit and everything, you really couldn't do that as much. Or I guess, where were we at the time when COVID hit?
Well, when COVID hit, I think, 2020 was the year that I was starting to plan for the record. And then 2021 was when I began officially recording the majority of it. I recorded Neanderthals in 2020, released in 2021. And that was kind of the debut to say, to launch a Kickstarter and say, I'm putting on a record, and I'm starting a fundraiser for it. Would you support me in this? And so many people gave to that, which I'm very grateful for, because I was able to produce it in the exact way that I wanted the record to be, with the exceptions of course, I didn't get a full choir, so I had to make some exceptions here and there. But in that, it was really just a lot of going over to Taylor Simpson's home studio and recording whatever we could find or whatever we could use at the time. And so I would bring my acoustic guitar for one day, bring my electric guitar for the other days. He would play the drums, and then he would find percussion instruments for certain tracks to add certain elements, shakers sometimes. But even in the first song of the record, he used African drums. He used congas. He used different elements of drums all throughout the world, and it was incredible getting to put that in together. But I think when COVID hit, like, since we were friends and we both were not really worried about getting each other sick, and I think that and it just being the two of us, it gave us actually a lot more freedom just to work together and not have to worry about wearing a mask or like having to put like keep from shaking hands and everything like that and all that. So I think that at that time there was a little bit, it was still stressful in that season, but it was not at a point that because it was just the two of us working for a majority together, I think it gave that freedom to throw ideas back and forth to each other and put something in that element. And then everything else was just communicating through Zoom with other friends, specifically with Kenton. I think, he would send me a line and I'd be like, hey man, that was great. But can you redo this part or like do this a little bit differently? I hear this in my head. Can you do that? And I mean, he would take instruction incredibly well. So that's how you make a record. I think in a pandemic, I suppose, just get someone, or you send a line to them, you send the wave tracks, and then they send, or you send the demo to them, and then they send the wave track back to you, and your producer mixes it a certain way. There's a lot more that goes into it than just that, but I think it's certainly possible to do, which I'm amazed that it worked, especially for that being a first record. But by the grace of God, I think it came through.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Sorry.
Oh, okay. It's okay.
No, that's all right. It would just be a nice little boomer. But I was just saying, I was picturing you guys being germaphobes or something, be like, high five, and a bit, or maybe the hug. Okay. Nope.
A lot of fist bumps and then elbow bumps. Yeah.
Or the elbow bump or something like that.
Yeah.
Or we just do like this. We do the Asian style.
That was incredibly popular, especially within New York too. So, I mean, for that whole season, man, that'll be a story to tell kids one of these days. I feel like, especially like the next generation who thankfully won't have to grow up with that. But
hopefully,
yeah, fingers crossed.
I would say, boy, our generation's had it pretty rough too. Since I would imagine you're a millennial too, but it's the financial crisis of 2007, 2008 that kind of lingered there, and then the pandemic hit afterwards. It was like 1-2 punch, that sort of thing. So you can probably imagine. But since we're on the topic of COVID, I guess, did you have any personal problems with COVID? Did it affect your family in any way?
Well, I appreciate you asking. For my family, it didn't necessarily affect me financially. For my parents, I think it was very hard on them. But also a blessing in disguise, because then it gave him a chance to be with my brother, because he came from Liberty University and did all of his work online and basically got to stay home with them. So they had a lot of time to spend with him. Thankfully, financially, I think they've been able to do okay through that. They weren't hurt. They didn't lose their job or anything like that. For myself, I was also very fortunate to not lose my job in that time of COVID. But I think the thing that affected me in COVID, I think, was there was a whole lot of isolation. And while I enjoy getting to have conversations over Skype and FaceTime and Zoom and everything, there was just a lot of loneliness and isolation that I had faced. And I think that it really affected my mental health. Also went through a bit of heartbreak in 2020, just with a breakup that happened, and I think that everyone goes through those experiences at some point in their life, but I think that for some reason everything just hit a whole lot harder when you have that separation and you don't have anybody to talk to in that. And I think the beauty of all the heartbreak, and I think like the effects it did on my mental health. And, in honesty, I think there were some areas where I fell into perhaps some addictions to social media and to other things that, I feel were really have not been beneficial for me. And I'm still working through many pieces of that. I'm still needing to heal and to detox from certain areas. But I do think that in the midst of what happened in 2020, I'm grateful that there's been moments of healing, like getting to create a record, I think was a great success. And then being able to write new songs about grief as well, which aren't on this first record, but may show up in a second record, Lord willing. And so, everyone went through a hard time. And, I think that there are moments where I've had to go through fighting depression, fighting through anxiety, fighting through fear of people even. And I think that one of my biggest mistakes when everything started was being so protective of everybody and being so judgmental of people who were not following orders and restrictions. And then realizing by the time that I got the virus, I was like, I've been so afraid of this. And there are so many people who have had it much worse than me. And I couldn't even protect myself from it. So, I think from that whole experience, there was a lot of probably some friendships that I had hurt in that time, to be completely real. And there was some people that moved away or I lost contact with. And I'm very sad from that. And I hope one day, if they haven't forgiven me already, that they will, and that relationship can be restored. But, in all of that, I have to believe that all of this is working for something greater. And it's not that this was supposed to happen or was meant to happen. I mean, maybe it was meant to happen, but in spite of all the terrible things that have occurred, I believe that something beautiful can come from the ashes.
Well, I would hope in a certain way, but yeah, I can relate to it in some sense, more so with how it affected me mentally. So yeah, you kind of fell into some form of addictions and social media and stuff like that, as well as like what some people were saying. Unfortunately, then it gets back into the politics, that sort of thing, especially then what was going on and everything too. So you were hoping everything would have just died down, but then unfortunately it just came back a little bit stronger. So unfortunately it lingered there a little bit. So I can see what you mean too. And when you said blessing in disguise, I guess, did it allow you to kind of expand into like social media on a good note, I should say, because I know you said social media is more of a bad thing, but
I mean, yeah, social media is not evil in a sense. It's like, it's more, I think, what it's become as of recently can turn into, some forms. There's plenty of evil that exists in that, especially if you let it consume your minds. But no, I think that from the experience of using social media, it's actually been a benefit to reach many people that I couldn't reach because they weren't physically in the room. So there is beauty to having that. I think getting the opportunities to play live. I think there was a moment where I played live when I actually had COVID, which probably sounds pretty ridiculous. But I mean, since I had to quarantine for 10 days, I'm like, this is actually a blessing in disguise because I can practice music. I can write songs. I can perform for people with a live stream. I won't get paid, but hey, it's still an opportunity to reach people, and it really was, I think, something that of getting to create more. And I think from that, I learned how to use certain programs like Canva for promotions or for advertisements for performances. And thankfully, I think as I started making a record, I started the experience of getting to perform in bars and restaurants, which were places that bars I would have never thought 10 years ago that I would ever perform in. But I'm so grateful to be doing that now because I get to reach a different audience that I couldn't reach in the church. And I think that that's something that so many people frown upon, I think, in like strict Christian societies. But in the reality, it's like, how are you going to reach people with the truth if you don't actually go to where they are? And I think that there's this whole mistake of, and forgive me for rambling on this, but how can you actually be the church if you're only meeting on Sunday mornings and meeting in your small bubbles, when the reality is the church was not defined to be a small bubble, but it's meant to be going out into the world. And so, everything that happens, or that has nothing to do with social media. But I think that in a manner, it's showing that you can also reach an audience through making content and through creating and just sharing songs. And so getting to do that has been a blessing, and sometimes very tiring too, because it's a lot of work, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I can understand too, especially going with the drunken, sometimes the rowdy crowd too, when you run into those kind of people. But yeah, you are right. You can't just limit yourself to just people who come into church and expect them to be like maybe clean, or because we tried prohibition and see how that worked out. To be honest, that these days you'd probably start a civil war over that if you wanted to prohibit beer and stuff like that.
Well, prohibition is kind of like, I mean, that was the cancel culture of what they call cancel culture today. It's like that was cancel culture back then. So sometimes you could say we started it, but that's a whole other conversation. So,
well, I understand that, but sometimes there's a little bit of an ethical reason, especially in that sense too, because the people who at least started, it was because their husbands were abusive and they drank a lot. So you can see why. So there's perhaps some sort of ethics behind it, but unfortunately it gets blown way out of proportion. I guess the same thing can tie into the church too, with stuff here and there. But as we probably mentioned, and we seem to keep finding ourselves coming back to it too, it comes back to politics in some sort of way. So you can see why. But I guess, do you sometimes do your own little studio work in your house?
Well, I haven't done so much as of recently. I think that the challenge of where I currently live, being in an apartment at the moment, it's a little bit more echoey, so it's much harder to actually create studio work for where I am. So right now I'm trying to get more of the experience of getting to work with other musicians and to pay them or to work with them in their studios to actually record. There has been some experiences where I will attempt to record for where I am. And I think that I got that experience a lot when I was living in New York, getting to create a bit of an environment and trying to record covers of songs, specifically, like I think I did a cover of somebody that I used to know back in 2020. And that was just recording guitar, piano, or keys and vocals multiple times and layering different pieces of that together. That's probably the biggest scope of my work, trying to do home studio recording. One of these days when I can actually get my proper acoustic panels for a room, I would love to do that efficiently.
I see. I guess, what sort of gear do you use when you actually do want to try to record in a studio? And I guess eventually when you get the soundproofing and stuff like that too, which I imagine must be a major investment.
Yeah, well, I think for the professional producers, they probably will hate me because I use a Scarlett Focusrite USB. I mean, that's typically for right now being one person. I don't bands, but typically just using that in an SM7B, and then sometimes using something like the Yeti microphone or the I think I also have a condenser microphone as well, sometimes to use for acoustic guitar. That's been beneficial to just simply record individual instruments. And the nice thing about getting to use, I have a Roland keyboard as well that I've used currently. Is in repairs at the moment, but using that as well for recording different lines using software like Ableton, I think that's been my experience. I know the professionals prefer using stuff like Pro Tools and Logic, and if I had more room to put Logic in my computer, I would. But I've put Ableton in so much specifically from the experiences of getting to do live music and performing tracks or using tracks in church specifically. That's been a big benefit in my live music performances. And I think that at the last church, I even learned certain arts, such as not so much studio arts, but getting into arts such as automation. I was studying with using videos from websites like Churchfront. I was able to learn how to automate lights and lyrics for Sunday morning services. So when there were times where there wasn't volunteers in the tech team to be able to be there to run the lights, or to run the lyrics, then I could actually have it just automated so the lyrics could come up like 2 seconds right before I'm supposed to sing a line. And that made life so much easier for me. But that's been my expertise, not so much on like the studio side. It's been more on like the live performance side in that way, and like getting the visual features properly working.